She was just 7 years old. That's what they always say. As if innocence alone should have been enough to protect her. But on a quiet spring day in 1999, Aundria Bowman climbed onto her pink bike and rode straight into the hands of a monster. She never made it home. At first it looked like a tragic disappearance, a small-town child who simply vanished on her way to Grandma's. But behind the scenes there was a secret so disturbing, so buried in silence, that even seasoned investigators would be haunted by it for years. This wasn't just the story of a missing child. This was the story of a predator living inside her home. Not a stranger, but someone her mother trusted. Someone who had already done the unthinkable before, and got away with it. His name was Donald Wayne Collins, her mother's partner, and what he did to Aundria defied belief. But what's worse, the system saw him coming, and still, it let him in. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. In 1993, 6 years before Aundria vanished, a 13-year-old boy named Donald Wayne Collins was arrested. His crime? He had doused another child, a mere 8-year-old, with gasoline and lit him on fire. That child was Robbie Middleton. Robbie survived, but he was burned over 99% of his body. He would go through over 200 surgeries in his short life. But Donald? He served just a few months in juvenile detention. Texas law said he was too young to be tried as an adult. He walked free, without ever being labelled what he truly was, a danger to children. And when he was released, the system didn't track him, didn't monitor him, didn't warn the communities where he lived. And eventually, he moved in with a woman who had a little girl. Her name was Aundria. What no one knew, or maybe no one wanted to know, was that Donald had already been accused of sexually abusing Robbie Middleton before he set him on fire. The flames weren't just a cover-up, they were silence, enforced with fire. And still, no registry, no supervision, no alert. So when Aundria disappeared in 1999, no one immediately suspected the man living under the same roof. He wasn't even considered. And by the time the truth started to unravel, it was far too late. Now let's talk. If the system had labelled Donald Collins as a predator back in 1993, do you think Aundria's life could have been saved? Drop your thoughts below. I'm reading every comment. And if stories like this matter to you, hit that subscribe button. You're helping us shine light on the cases the world tried to forget. When Aundria vanished on March 27, 1999, her mother was the one who called it in. The story was simple. She said, Aundria ran away after an argument. Police took the statement, filed the report. They believed it. Why? Because Aundria was in foster care before, because she had bounced between homes, because she was a child in the system, and in their eyes that made her disposable. They didn't issue an Amber Alert, didn't search the neighborhood, didn't go door to door, didn't question her mother's partner, the man living in the same house, the same man with a sealed juvenile record, the same man with a burned boy's blood on his hands just 6 years earlier. But those records? Locked away. No one connected the dots. Instead, the narrative stuck. Aundria was just another runaway. And in a twisted way, that story helped Donald, because the world wasn't looking for a missing child, it was looking for a rebellious teen who didn't want to be found. Meanwhile, Aundria's room sat untouched, her belongings still in place, no signs of packing, no sign she planned anything. Only one thing was missing: Aundria. And the only one not talking was the man who lived with her last. The silence was beginning to rot, but it would take 12 more years before it broke wide open. 12 years. That's how long Aundria Bowman remained missing. Her name barely mentioned, her face fading from flyers, her story buried beneath bureaucracy and indifference. But in 2011, someone else, a boy, was fighting for his life. His name, Robert Middleton. The same boy who, in 1998, was set on fire on his 8th birthday in Splendora, Texas, burned over 99% of his body. Miraculously, he lived for 13 years. But the damage was irreversible, the pain constant. Doctors couldn't save him anymore. At just 20 years old, Robert was dying, and that's when he said it. From his hospital bed, broken and barely breathing, he gave a televised statement, a final act of courage. He said, "It wasn't a random attack. Donald Wayne Collins did this to me. He raped me 2 weeks before he set me on fire. For 13 years, the world thought Donald had only committed arson. Now Robert revealed the full horror. This man wasn't just violent, he was a predator, and he was free." But Robert's confession didn't stop there. In fact, it cracked open something far darker, because investigators began digging into Donald's past, his juvenile record, his whereabouts in 1999, and that's when a familiar name surfaced, Aundria Bowman. She had vanished from the very home Donald lived in the very town he roamed, under the very same circumstances, silence, secrecy, fear. Suddenly, everything changed. One brave boy's dying breath became the voice Aundria never got to use, and the case that had gone cold for over a decade, it was now on fire. Donald Wayne Collins was 16 years old when Robert Middleton was burned alive, just a teenager, but already a predator, already capable of the unthinkable. After Robert's televised deathbed confession in 2011, investigators reopened the case, and what they found was damning. Not just because Robert named Donald as his rapist and attacker, but because it wasn't the first time. You see, Donald had a juvenile record, but because he was underage, those records had been sealed, until now. And when authorities pushed for access, a disturbing timeline unraveled. In 1995, 3 years before the fire, Donald had already been accused of sexual assault. That victim? Another young boy. He was convicted but served almost no time, released back into the same community, untreated, unmonitored, and unrepentant. Then came Robert's attack in 1998. Again, Donald was arrested. Again, he was released. And then, just 8 months later, in the same quiet Texas town, Aundria Bowman vanished. A 12-year-old girl living under the same roof as Donald, her mother's partner. Gone. Without a trace. Police now had enough to pursue Donald again. Not just for what he did to Robert, but possibly for what he did to Aundria. They brought him in for questioning. He was older now, quiet, emotionless. And as they interrogated him, his story shifted, then cracked. He denied knowing what happened to Aundria. But one of the officers leaned in and said, "We know you did it. The only question is, how deep does the evil go?" Now let's talk. If Robert hadn't spoken from his deathbed, would Aundria's case ever have reopened? Would you have had the courage to speak out like he did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Also, where are you watching from? I'd love to know. It had been nearly 16 years since 12-year-old Aundria Bowman vanished. No body, no crime scene, no real answers. Just a mother left shattered, a community left cold, and a man, Donald Wayne Collins, walking free, protected by shadows and sealed files. But now, those shadows were gone. Investigators dug deep, back into Donald's timeline, back into the records that were once buried. They uncovered how, after Robert's attack, Donald had continued a disturbing pattern. He'd lived in different towns under different names, always around vulnerable people, always near young girls. But it was a new forensic tool that would finally break the case open: familial DNA tracking. In a stroke of chilling irony, DNA from a relative of Donald's was already in the system. And when investigators matched a piece of degraded material from a long-preserved piece of Aundria's clothing, the hit came back: Donald Wayne Collins. That was enough for a murder charge. But here's where it gets worse. When they confronted him, he didn't cry. He didn't deny it. He simply said, "You can't prove what happened, not completely." It was a taunt, as if he thought once again the system would fail. But this time it didn't. Armed with Robert's deathbed statement, DNA evidence, and a long-suppressed pattern of abuse, prosecutors filed for capital murder. Courtroom cameras rolled as Donald was brought in. No longer the silent teenager, now a hardened man, expressionless. And in that courtroom sat Aundria's mother, still grieving, still hoping to find her daughter's remains, still holding on to the last image of her little girl. Smiling, innocent, full of life. It was Robert Middleton's voice from the grave that echoed most powerfully. His courage had not only brought justice for himself, but it reopened the door for Aundria's case, and finally forced the world to look into the face of a hidden monster. Donald Wayne Collins was convicted, sentenced to life in prison. But one mystery still remains. Donald Wayne Collins may have been convicted, but the question that haunted her mother every night, the question the world still can't answer, remained painfully unanswered. Where is Aundria Bowman's body? He never said. Not during interrogation, not during trial, not even after sentencing. He kept that final truth locked inside, like some sick trophy, a secret he knew would torment her family forever. Investigators searched. They combed through wooded areas, dried up creeks, forgotten lots near Trinity. They brought in cadaver dogs, drones, thermal imaging. They even consulted psychics, because when logic fails, desperation knocks. But still, nothing. The only clue came from an offhanded comment Donald reportedly made to a fellow inmate. "She's long gone. You ain't finding bones in a swamp." That single line reignited the search around Trinity River, a slow, murky current known for swallowing everything. If he dumped her there, she may never be found. And yet, her mother still waits. She says she doesn't want revenge. She wants a grave to visit, a place to cry, to speak her daughter's name aloud without wondering if the wind is the only one listening. Justice was served, but not completely, because without Aundria's body, there's still a piece of her story missing. And sometimes, closure isn't a verdict. It's a grave, one that remains empty. Some stories end with closure, some with justice. But Aundria Bowman's story, it ends with a question mark. She was only a child, one who loved music, drawing, and climbing trees barefoot. One who trusted the adults around her, especially the man her mother brought home. Instead, he became her worst nightmare. What happened to Aundria in those final moments is something we may never fully know, but what we do know is that the system failed her. Twice. The first time, when a young Donald Wayne Collins burned another child and was allowed to walk free. The second, when he used that freedom to take a life. Aundria never made it home that day in 1996. And every year since, her mother has marked another birthday. Without candles, without hugs, without her daughter. Collins is now serving a life sentence, but his silence is louder than any scream. And somewhere, beneath a Texas sky, a little girl's remains may still lie hidden, waiting to be found. Because even monsters sometimes bury their shame where they think no one will ever dig. Aundria Bowman was 12 years old. She should have had sleepovers, graduation, her first kiss, a life. But all she got was a headline, and a mother still whispering her name to the stars.